I'm staring at the glow of my iPad right now, sitting at the kitchen island while the rest of the neighborhood is asleep. The coffee in my mug went cold about an hour ago, but I haven't moved. The screen is open to my patient portal. You know the one. That digital filing cabinet that holds every blood test, every prescription, every doctor's note from the last 10 years. But I'm not looking at my lab results. I'm looking at the section labeled Emergency Contacts. For the last 12 years, since my husband passed away, that list has remained identical. Contact number 1, David, my eldest son. Contact number 2, Maya, my daughter. Contact number 3, Elaine, my younger sister. It looks like the perfect American family safety net, doesn't it? It looks like a wall of protection. It looks like love. 10 minutes ago, I highlighted David's name. I watched the little blue box surround the letters of the boy I labored for 22 hours to bring into this world, and I pressed the backspace key. Then I did it to Maya. Then I did it to Elaine. I sat in the silence of my kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, and I watched the screen refresh. No emergency contacts listed. The system actually flashed a little red warning icon at me, as if to say, "Are you crazy? You're 68 years old, living alone, with a history of mild hypertension. You can't be blank." But the truth is, I have been blank for a very long time. I just didn't have the courage to admit it to myself until today. We don't talk about this. People my age, we sit around in book clubs or at coffee shops, and we brag about our children. We show photos of our grandchildren on our phones. We talk about the vacations they're taking, the promotions they're getting, the beautiful homes they are buying. Homes, I might add, that many of us helped finance by quietly gutting our own retirement accounts. We curate this illusion that we are the anchors of a thriving, interconnected family tree. We fill out these intake forms at the dentist, at the optometrist, at the cardiologist, and we write down the names of our biological relatives because that is the default setting of our entire society. We are conditioned to believe that blood is the ultimate insurance policy. We type their names onto the lines because writing down anything else feels like an admission of failure. It feels like confessing that the family you poured your life, your youth, and your bank account into isn't actually there to catch you when you fall. My son David lives in Seattle. I live in the suburbs of Detroit. He is a 4-hour flight away, assuming there are no layovers and assuming he can even get to the airport. My daughter, Maya, she lives in Brooklyn. She is an art director for a boutique advertising agency. She is brilliant, she is driven, and she is entirely consumed by a life that leaves her vibrating with stress from the moment she wakes up to the moment she goes to sleep. My sister Elaine retired to Tampa 5 years ago. For a decade, I carried the names of 3 people who live thousands of miles away as my first line of defense against tragedy. Why? Because I loved them. Because I wanted to believe that if the worst happened, love would somehow collapse the distance. Love would make David's phone ring loud enough to wake him up at 2 a.m. Love would make Maya put down her client pitch and sprint to LaGuardia. But a medical emergency doesn't care who you love. A crisis doesn't respect your emotional bonds or your familial history. A crisis is an exercise in brutal, immediate logistics. It is a matter of geography, of physics, of who can physically put their hands on you, talk to a paramedic, grab your keys, and lock your front door. I have spent the better part of the last 20 years being the crisis manager for everyone whose names I just erased. When Richard died, I didn't fall apart because I couldn't afford to. The kids were in their late 20s, trying to navigate their own grief, and they leaned on me with the heavy, unthinking weight that children always use with their mothers. I handled the funeral, I sorted the probate, I kept the house running. Then came the financial crises. When David wanted to start a restaurant venture in 2018, the banks wouldn't look at him. He came to me. He sat right where I am sitting now, at this kitchen island, and he outlined his dream. I withdrew $45,000 from my IRA to give him the seed money. I paid the taxes on the withdrawal. I absorbed the penalty. I told myself it was an investment in my son's future. The restaurant closed in 18 months. We never talk about the money. He never offered to pay it back, and I never asked. Because mothers aren't supposed to ask, we are supposed to absorb. When Maya got married 2 years later, she wanted a venue in upstate New York that cost more than my first house. I paid for it. I wore the mother of the bride dress. I smiled for the photos. I wrote the check. When Elaine went through a vicious, prolonged divorce in 2015, she lived in my spare bedroom for 8 months. I paid for her groceries. I paid her retainer for a forensic accountant because her husband was hiding assets. I sat up with her until 3 in the morning, drinking wine and letting her cry, absorbing her rage and her sorrow until I was hollowed out myself. I tell you all of this not to paint myself as a martyr. I did these things willingly. I did them because I genuinely believed that this is how you build a family. You pour yourself into them. You construct a fortress of generosity and support, and you blindly, foolishly assume that the drawbridge works both ways. You assume that because you gave them your peak earning years, your emotional bandwidth, and your unconditional presence, they will naturally be there when your body begins to betray you. You assume that the currency of past sacrifices buys future security. It is the great lie of the American family. We treat our adult children like emotional 401k seconds. We deposit our money, our time, and our energy, expecting that when we hit our twilight years, we can make withdrawals. But I started looking at the actual data of my life. I started conducting a quiet, brutal audit of the last 5 years, evaluating not what I felt for my family, but what they actually did when I needed them. The first crack in the glass happened 4 years ago. It was February of 2022. We had a massive ice storm here in Michigan. The power grid failed. The temperature outside dropped to 9 degrees, and the temperature inside my house was plummeting fast. I am not a frail woman, but the cold was sinking into my bones, and my pipes were beginning to freeze. I called David in Seattle. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him, "Power is out, freezing, trying to figure out what to do." I called Maya. She answered, but she was in the back of an Uber heading to a gallery opening. The music was loud in the background. "Mom, I can barely hear you. Call the electric company. I have to go. I'm so sorry. Love you." Click. I texted Elaine. 3 hours later, Elaine texted back, not with help, not with a plan, but with a complaint about how her homeowners association in Tampa was being unreasonable about her new patio furniture. She hadn't even registered what I said. We just waved at each other when we dragged the trash cans to the curb. But Arthur saw that my chimney wasn't smoking, and he knew I lived alone. He bundled up, walked through the ice, and knocked on my door. He brought a kerosene space heater, a heavy wool blanket, and a thermos of chicken and wild rice soup. He sat with me in a living room for 4 hours by the glow of a battery-powered lantern, just to make sure I stayed warm. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't make me feel like a burden. He just saw a logistical problem in his immediate vicinity, and he solved it. I brushed that incident off. I made excuses for my kids. David is in a different time zone. He was probably working. Maya is young and building her career. Elaine is dealing with her own life. I wrapped their absence in a blanket of rationalizations, because the alternative, that I was fundamentally alone in a crisis, was too terrifying to look at directly. Then came the gallbladder scare of 2024. I woke up at 2 a.m. with a pain in my abdomen so sharp and radiating that I was convinced I was having a massive heart attack. I couldn't breathe. I was sweating through my sheets. I crawled to the nightstand, grabbed my phone, and called 911. The paramedics arrived, loaded me into the ambulance, and asked for my emergency contact. I gave them Maya's number, figuring New York was awake enough. I lay in the triage bay of the emergency room for 6 hours. The fluorescent lights were blinding. The beeping of the monitors was deafening. I was terrified, pumped full of morphine, waiting for an ultrasound, completely by myself. The charge nurse came in and told me they had called Maya 3 times and left voicemails. They tried David, voicemail. They tried Elaine, voicemail. Maya finally called the hospital back at 9 a.m. They patched her through to the phone by my bed. I picked it up, my hands shaking from the IV line. "Mom?" she practically screamed. "Oh my God, why is the hospital calling me? You gave me a panic attack. I was in a meeting with the creative director. What is going on? Are you dying?" I spent the next 20 minutes, while actively waiting to find out if I needed emergency surgery, comforting my daughter. I had to manage her anxiety. I had to lower my voice, speak calmly, and assure her that I was fine, that it was just a gallbladder issue, that she didn't need to worry. "Do you want me to try and fly out?" she asked. But it wasn't a real offer. It was the kind of question people ask when they desperately need you to say no. I could hear the tension in her voice. I could hear the silent plea. "Please don't inconvenience me today. Please don't make me choose between my career and your body." "No, sweetheart," I told her. "I'm fine. I'll take a taxi home." Okay, thank God," she breathed. The relief so palpable it stung. "Keep me posted. Let me know if you need anything. I have to get back to this pitch." Let me know if you need anything. It's the emptiest phrase in the English language. It places the burden of asking squarely on the shoulders of the person who is already carrying the weight of the crisis. I took a taxi home that afternoon. The driver had to help me up my front steps. My house was dark, the air was stale, and my cat hadn't been fed. I sat on my sofa, clutching a pillow against my stomach, and I looked at my phone. There was a text from David. "Maya said you're at the hospital. Let me know you are okay. Crazy day here." There was a text from Elaine. "Just heard. Hope it's nothing serious. The weather here is awful today." That was it. That was the return on my investment. That was the safety net I had sacrificed my retirement, my peace of mind, and my financial security to build. You would think that would be the moment I changed my emergency contacts. But the psychological conditioning runs deep. To remove your children from your medical forms feels like you are disowning them. It feels like a betrayal. I told myself that they were just busy. I told myself that long-distance support is hard. I justified, I rationalized, I forgave. I left their names right where they were. The turning point, the real one, the one that brought me to this kitchen island at 3 a.m. today, happened 3 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday afternoon. It had rained the night before, and the wooden steps leading down from my back deck to the garden were slick with a thin layer of moss and water. I was carrying a heavy terracotta pot out to the yard. I wasn't rushing, I wasn't being careless, but my foot caught the edge of the second step. My rubber-soled shoe slipped, and I went down hard. There was a sickening crack that echoed in my own head. My right wrist snapped as I tried to break my fall, and my left knee twisted beneath me. I landed in the wet grass, the terracotta pot shattering next to me, dirt spilling across the lawn. The pain was immediate and blinding. It wasn't the dull ache of the gallbladder. It was a sharp, white-hot agony that made me instantly nauseous. I couldn't stand. My right arm was bent at an angle that made my stomach heave. My phone was inside the house, sitting on the kitchen counter. I lay in the wet grass for 20 minutes, trying to catch my breath, trying to figure out how to crawl up 3 wooden steps with one working arm and one working leg. I remember looking up at the gray sky, feeling the damp cold seeping through my jeans, and realizing with absolute clarity, if I die right here, David won't know until Thursday. Maya won't know until she realizes I haven't liked her Instagram post. Elaine won't know until next week. I didn't call for them in my mind. I didn't wish for my kids. I wished for a stranger. I wished for the mailman. I wished for a delivery driver. I wished for anyone with a physical body who was within 50 feet of my house. Eventually, by some miracle of adrenaline, I managed to drag myself up the steps on my left elbow and my right knee. I crawled across the deck, through the sliding glass door, and into the kitchen. I reached up, pulled the phone off the counter with my left hand, and dialed 911. By the time the ambulance got there, I was in shock. I was shivering violently. In the emergency room, they cut my sweater off. They pumped me full of fentanyl. An emergency social worker, a tired-looking woman named Janet with a clipboard, came into my bay. "I need to contact someone for you, honey. You're going to need surgery on this wrist, and you can't drive yourself home. Who is your emergency contact?" "David." I gave her the number. Janet walked away. 10 minutes later, she came back. Straight to voicemail. Left a message. "Who else?" "Maya." I gave her the number. Janet walked away again. 5 minutes later, she returned, looking slightly apologetic. "I spoke to Maya. She said she's at the airport, heading to London for a shoot. She said she can't turn around. She asked if you have a neighbor." She asked if I have a neighbor. I lay there staring at the acoustic tiles on the ceiling. My daughter, the woman whose out-of-state tuition I paid by remortgaging the house I was currently bleeding in, outsourced my emergency to a hypothetical neighbor. "Do you have a neighbor?" Janet asked gently. "Call Helen," I said. Helen is a woman in my book club. We are both retired. We meet for coffee every Tuesday morning at a local diner. We talk about literature, about our gardens, about the strange invisibility of aging. She lives 2 miles away. I gave Janet her number. Janet made the call. She didn't leave the room this time. I heard her say, "Helen?" "Yes, I'm at St. Mary's Hospital with your friend." Yes, she had a fall. Broken wrist, torn meniscus. Janet paused, listening. Then she smiled. "Okay. Yes, Bay 4. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Alan didn't ask if it was a good time. She didn't ask if I really needed her. She didn't panic and require me to soothe her. She just got in her Subaru and drove. When Helen walked through the curtain of my hospital bay, she was carrying my spare set of house keys, the ones I had given her a year ago to feed my cat when I went on a weekend trip. She was carrying my phone charger. She was carrying a clean, loose button-down shirt that I wouldn't have to pull over my head. She walked up to the bed, took my good hand, and said, "I locked the back door, the cat is fed, the terracotta mess is swept off the deck. Now, what did the orthopedic surgeon say?" I burst into tears. Not from the pain, from the sheer, overwhelming relief of being managed, from the profound grace of a functional safety net. Helen sat in that uncomfortable plastic chair for 6 hours while they pinned my wrist. When I woke in recovery, she was reading a paperback novel. She had spoken to the doctors. She had written down my medication schedule on a yellow legal pad. She knew exactly when my next dose of antibiotics was due. My kids didn't even know what pharmacy I used. When they discharged me, Helen drove me home. She walked me inside, helped me into bed, propped my arm on pillows, and put a glass of water and my pills on the nightstand. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight," she said, brokering no argument. "Arthur from down the street is coming over tomorrow to fix the bottom step on your deck so this doesn't happen again. Get some sleep." As I lay in the dark that night, listening to the quiet sounds of Helen moving around my house, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from David. "Maya said you fell and broke your arm. Sorry, Mom, that sucks. Keep us posted on what the doc says. Let me know if you need money for the copay." I stared at the screen. Let me know if you need money. I almost laughed out loud. The irony of my son, the boy whose failed restaurant wiped out a quarter of my retirement, offering to send me $50 for a hospital copay via Venmo, while a woman I met at a library book sale was downstairs washing my dishes. I didn't reply. I just turned the phone over. It took 3 weeks of sitting in my house, navigating life with a cast on my right arm and a brace on my knee, for the psychological shift to finally take hold. In those 3 weeks, David called once. We spoke for 10 minutes. He spent 8 of those minutes complaining about his landlord in Seattle. Maya texted emojis. Elena sent a generic get-well-soon card in the mail, as if I were a distant acquaintance. But Helen came over every single day. She brought groceries. She helped me shower. Arthur came over and reinforced the deck steps. Another neighbor, a young guy named Marcus, who I barely knew, saw my trash cans still sitting at the curb one evening and just quietly walked them up my driveway, placing them by the garage without ever asking for a thank you. I began to realize that an emergency contact is not a ceremonial title. It is not an award you hand out to the people you love the most. It is not a badge of honor for biological relation. An emergency contact is a job description. It requires specific qualifications. It requires physical proximity, the ability to arrive within the golden hour of a crisis. It requires emotional regulation, the ability to walk into a hospital room and advocate for a patient without making the emergency about your own feelings. And it requires willingness, the actual, tangible desire to inconvenience yourself for the survival of another human being. My children possess exactly 0 of those qualifications. They have my history, they have my love, they have my legacy, but they do not have the capacity to save my life. So this morning, I woke up before the sun. My wrist is still aching, wrapped in a rigid brace. I made a cup of coffee with my left hand. I sat down at the iPad. I opened my chart, and I fired them. I deleted David. I deleted Maya. I deleted Elaine. I sat with the blank screen for a long time. There was a wave of grief, I won't lie. It felt like severing a cord. It felt like admitting that the grand narrative of the all-providing, perfectly cohesive family was a fiction. I was officially letting go of the fantasy that they would be the ones sitting by my bed at the end. But following the grief, came an emotion I didn't expect. Peace. A deep, quiet, radical peace. The heavy burden of expectation lifted off my chest. I no longer had to wait for a phone to ring that never would. I no longer had to silently resent them for failing tests they didn't even know they were taking. I was finally dealing with reality. I clicked Add New Contact. I typed in Helen's name. I typed in her phone number. Under Relationship to Patient, there is a drop-down menu. You can select spouse, child, sibling, parent. I scrolled all the way to the bottom and selected friend. Then I clicked Add Another Contact. I typed in Arthur's name. I selected neighbor. Yesterday afternoon, before I did this, I had Helen over for tea. I sat across from her in the living room. I told her what I was planning to do. I didn't want to make her my emergency contact without her consent. That's another thing we do with our kids. We draft them into the role of caregiver without ever asking if they want the job. I looked at Helen and I said, I want you to put me on my medical files. I want you to be the person they call. I know it's a lot to ask, but my kids can't do it. They just can't. Helen set her teacup down. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look burdened. She just looked at me with the calm, steady gaze of a woman who has also lived a long life and learned the hard way how the world actually works. I would be honored, she said. But we have to make a deal. You have to put me on yours, and I am going to put you on mine. My daughter is in Chicago. She's got 3 little ones. She can't drop everything. We have to look out for each other. We shook hands on it. A mutual safety pact, forged not by blood, but by geography, reliability, and shared reality. After I finished with the medical portal this morning, I picked up my iPhone. I opened the health app. I went into the medical ID section, the one that paramedics can access from your lock screen if you're unconscious. I deleted David. I deleted Maya. I deleted Elaine. I added Helen. I added Arthur. I set up a tiered system in my own head. If I fall, I call Arthur because he is 400 feet away and has a key. If I have to go to the hospital, I call Helen because she knows my medical history and isn't afraid of doctors. If I die, then, and only then, does someone call David and Maya. Because managing a death doesn't require proximity. It doesn't require speed. They can handle the grief from a distance. They can book their flights on their own time. They can plan the memorial. They can inherit the house. I am not cutting them out of my life. I still love them. I will still answer their calls when they want to complain about their bosses or their landlords. I will still send presents for their birthdays. I will still play the role of the listening ear. But I am no longer trusting them with my survival. They don't know I've done this. I don't plan on making a grand announcement. There will be no dramatic family Zoom call where I lay out their failures and list my grievances. That would only trigger their defensiveness. They would accuse me of being passive-aggressive, of guilt-tripping them, of not understanding how busy and important their lives are. They will find out eventually. Maybe next year when David comes to visit for Thanksgiving, he'll see the emergency contact magnet I just ordered for the fridge, and he'll notice that his name isn't on it. Maybe Maya will see it when she finally takes a weekend off to visit. Or maybe they won't ever know until a doctor hands them a form to sign someday, and they see Helen's signature already on the line above theirs. It doesn't matter when they find out. What matters is that the illusion is broken, and in its place is a concrete floor of reality. For decades, We tie ourselves into knots, trying to keep the biological family at the center of our universe. We give them our money. We give them our houses. We give them our youth. We forgive their absences, and we excuse their selfishness because society tells us that family is everything. But when you are lying on the wet grass with a broken bone, family is just a concept. A neighbor with a flashlight and a steady hand is a reality. I am closing the iPad now. The sun is starting to come up over the trees in the backyard. I can see the new wood on the bottom step of my deck, where Arthur repaired it. I am going to get dressed. I am going to walk down the street to Helen's house, and we are going to go to the diner for our Tuesday coffee. I feel lighter than I have in 20 years. I am no longer waiting for the people I raised to finally turn around and catch me. I have built a net out of the people who were actually standing right next to me. It's not ceremonial. It's not romantic. It won't look good on a greeting card. But it works. And for the first time since I got old, I actually feel safe.